episode of the DailyFlip podcast. I'm your host, Alex, and today we're going to be flipping through a story talking about building out military infrastructure moving into the future and how we can make the supply chains more robust. We will end today with our daily delight, a story meant to leave you feeling positive, ready to take on the day. But that's enough rambling from me. Let's jump into our daily debate. If you were able to 3D print all of the materials you needed on spot all the time, would you take that opportunity to retool all of your processes and maybe even spend all that money in order to have that flexibility? And that's the end of my quote, my end of my question there, because that is exactly what the U.S. military is trying to do, on top of some other interesting innovations that will prep it for the future. So this article comes from Business Insider. The headline reads, "The U.S. military is stress testing the tools it needs to keep its forces in the fight." Now, when you think about modularity, as we've talked about before, when you think about being able to have a supply chain basically integrated directly into your boat, and I say that because the supply chain itself is not actually in the warship or on any military base, but essentially have multiple parts of a supply chain: the means of production, the finished product, and the actual materials that would be normally needed and shipped all around the world in order to make certain things. If you had all of those different things in one place, essentially, and then you just had to get the more raw materials, aka the filament, in this case, metal filament, to your location, would you not take advantage of that? Because in the military, there are plenty of different supply chain logistics positions that make sure that in the time of war, that this is something that is not necessarily a factor, that everything is secure, that all these supply chains will not be affected by war with any given nation. But now imagine a world where you have such a flexibility in what you're able to do with any given raw material. You don't actually have to rely on even your own home nation to make certain parts, and you don't have to ship them ahead of time. Rather, all you need is the filament. In this case, like I said, it's a special steel filament in order to make almost any part. That modularity, that flexibility alone ensures that you don't have to worry about supply chains falling apart in different ally or even hostile nations in order to survive during a war. That is something that cannot be taken lightly when trying to plan for the future, and it's something that deserves time and investment, in my opinion. So the U.S. military has been working on this project for a little bit of time, and we're starting to see a little bit more of a showcase from it, especially in some of these more recent stress tests that they've been doing. Quote, "In a future war, the U.S. military might not be able to rely on traditional supply chains. Instead of flying or shipping in replacement parts, it may be forced to build them on the spot, wherever it happens to be, on land, at sea, or on a remote island. Enter FleetWorks, a project rethinking how the U.S. military sustains its forces. Backed by Defense Works and the Naval Postgraduate School, it's working with industry partners in the U.S. military in new ways to test and build critical parts." End quote. Now, we've been for a long time a nation that relies on absolute strength, but more recently we've started to shift the metrics a little bit and talk about the quality of our outputs. And what do I mean by this? China currently has a larger navy than we do, though. Does that mean that it is of the same caliber? No, they don't have multiple airplane carriers like we do. They have, I believe, 3 last time I checked, and most of them have ramps in order to be able to launch their planes off, rather than high-speed cable systems and other such launch systems. So our technology seems to be better in that case, but as we know, China is rapidly advancing in the technological field as well, in the engineering field, in the mechanical field. They have the industrial base to be able to build fast, and they're not afraid to get their own inspiration, let's put it that way, from our technology. So what do we have to do in order to stay ahead? And I'm not saying China is the only adversary, but they're the closest one when it comes to our Navy, and they provide a important example because the metrics have shifted. Rather than simply saying we have the largest Navy, we have the most advanced Navy, is a normal talking point of people who want to say America is still on top. And I'm not pretending that we're not, but in order to stay on top, you have to continually innovate. You have to be the one saying, okay, even if we are not going to have the most ships out there, we're going to have the largest raw number of anything. We are going to have the best of things, and we're going to be able to repair them faster. Now, right now, China's ability to build ships and simply replace old ships that may have been damaged is much greater than ours. Though, of course, we've talked previously about a company trying to remedy this by creating modular drone boats, and potentially that technology could be used to make boats in the future in general if we continue down that path. But when it comes to repairing what we have rather than replacing it, which will take less resources, then this is where this sort of program comes in. Imagine an entire array, an entire warehouse of machines working at it in order to make parts while the repairs are actually made by an individual or multiple individuals. Trying to reduce these levels of supply chain integration, you don't have to necessarily wait to get things shipped in as they talked about here. Or you can have more custom fixes if you absolutely need it, because of course there are standard parts that those will be the ones that are approved ahead of time, that have been tested. But if you really need to make something, imagine an industrial sized, instead of a sheet cutter, imagine you basically have an industrial sized sheet printer and you're able to patch up holes in the hull. Now, would it be as good? Do we know if that the structural integrity of the ship would be exactly the same? This material would be as strong as our normal holes? We don't know that for sure, but like I said, the flexibility and the willingness to take on some of these new technologies and stress test them now, all of these are good things, and that's why FleetX, DefenseX, and DefenseWorks, FleetWorks, and the different programs that they're engaging in are absolutely crucial. Though we may never need to use them. Why would we want to ever have to use them? But that doesn't mean that it's not important to experiment, to be prepared, and at least have the technology up and running by the time something would happen. Now, I'm not advocating for the most military spending in the world, and never have, and I don't necessarily love interventionism, but that doesn't mean that I think we should leave our military to curl up in a ball and go away. There are important functions of the military, and also sponsoring technological growth, whether you like it or not, has actually been the one of the greatest pipelines for consumer products. The microwave is one of them, radar, GPS, all these sort of things. Now, the internet is also basically a government project, a military project. So remember, just because it is military spending does not inherently make it bad. Though, of course, we always have to make sure there's a return for our dollar. And in this case, this sort of technology, actually printing material that is of a more strong nature rather than just our cute little filaments, but out of aluminum steel, this could be extremely valuable down the road for the American consumer, for American producers, so on and so forth. So I'll finish out this segment by reading you one more article. Quote, at last year's Rim of the Pacific exercises, students from the Navy, Marine Corps, Army, and FleetWorks researched how additive manufacturing equipment like 3D printing worked at sea and on land. Submarine repair, shipbuilding more generally, and more important topics at the event. Those industrial bases have seen significant shrinkage in the decades since the Cold War, and the goals of revitalizing them have become a top priority for the military leaders, industrial partners, and the current administration. The emphasis isn't just on shipyards, though, it's also on working in the field. This is a complete reorientation, and it's going to take time to see the fruits of it. So if you go on to read the rest of this article, or you see any more of these in the future, remember, be patient. I'm not trying to give any excuses for anybody. If they're going to commit to do something, they need to do it right. But we need to see the fruits of this labor in the long term. That's the most likely time that we will see it. And we have to be patient enough to understand that it may not come within the next few years. And it may not be tested until many years down the road, which hopefully, in my opinion, is a good thing, because that means we're not going to war. But with that said, let's end on a more bright note. Rather than that, we'll go to our daily delight that comes from the Daily Bunny. Headline reads, "Bunny's eyes and ears are full on alert." And the photo, this guy, he's ready. He's rearing, he's jumping, he's ready to go. And there's probably a fox nearby, and that's why he's freaked out. But this was actually submitted by David and a mystery bunny that came through his yard. So if you want to go have a little smile, see what this little guy's up to, why he looks so terrified, you can jump down to the links in the description below, that like and subscribe button. Also down there you can find the podcast on Spotify, Pocket Cast, Podvine, as well as the Twitter handle at Your Daily Flip, where I post links to these episodes on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, as well as the 6 and 6 podcast that comes out on Tuesday and Thursday, and that's 6 stories from around the world in 6 minutes or less. It's a little bit of international news. So with all that said, there's only one more thing to say: stay safe, don't die.